Episode. Welcome to another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. As every time, I'm your host, Howard Holton, and I have another spectacular guest here this week, Shlomo, the CEO and founder of Cato Networks. How's it going, Shlomo?
Hi, pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you very much for coming on, and I'm excited about this in a way I'm not normally wicked excited, because we, just like always, we started talking about kind of what the topic will be, and you had a really, really interesting topic that I think is absolutely fascinating. And I don't want to steal your thunder, so why don't you go ahead and introduce it?
So perhaps I'll introduce myself.
Sure.
I've done cybersecurity for the last 30-something years. Entrepreneur and CEO of companies. The first one, I was the founder of Checkpoint, which created the network security category, obviously tens of billions of dollars today. Then the founder of and CEO of Imperva, and then Incapsula, which were one of the earliest companies, if not the earliest, in data security. Imperva was on-prem, and Incapsula was a cloud service in the cloud version of it. And my third company, Cato Networks, has invented SASE, which is, according to Gartner, the future of networking and network security. I'm also have been an investor in cyber in many companies. Perhaps the most famous one is I wrote the first check to Palo Alto Network and sat on the board until it became a public company. So quite a lot of experience in cybersecurity, and after 30 years, I have to say that cybersecurity is broken, which is a little embarrassing.
Wasn't kind of sorry? If we go back 30 years, it was kind of broken when it started, right?
It's always it was always a pendulum between complexity and attempts to simplify it in order to make it work. Because the worst enemy of security is complexity, and complexity brings with it insecurity, operational issues, business issues, and at the end, that's what makes it broken. So when Checkpoint started, we were not the first network firewall. There were other proxy-based firewalls that were more of a professional services engagements that let Telnet, FTP, and mail go out to the internet. But we were the first stateful. We invented stateful inspection. Checkpoint introduced stateful inspection firewall, and on a single floppy disk in 5 minutes, you can securely connect to the internet, and that was a revolution through that simplification. And again, 10 years passed, and there were too many of these floppy disks floating around, and you needed to configure all these servers and connect them with URL filtering and anti-malware and all of that, and that became very complicated again. So again, I don't know if you call it broken, but it was complex. So there was the new innovation of an appliance, which kind of converged all of that to a single hardware appliance where you can throw on the network and you're done, which was a great innovation. But again, digital transformation came, and the perimeter was gone, and you needed multiple products, appliance, cloud proxies, ZTNA, CASB, SD-WAN, some cloud security, a bunch of products to address this side of security. There are many others: data security, application security, and it became very, very complicated again. And essentially, all you need to know is to go on the exhibition hall of, say, the RSA trade show and see all the booths and think about the CISO of mid-sized, large enterprise with limited budget, with limited talent, and the need to take all these point products and deliver a working solution. And the news is that it's not working. And and the supporting evidence to that, is the fact that over the last few years, if you look at the percentage of the IT budget that goes to IT security, it grows significantly year over year, and yet the loss due to data breaches also grows year over year. So essentially, we spend more on security as an organization, any enterprise, and we are less secure, and it's become worse and worse. And we can talk about some stuff in the future that will make it even worse.
But isn't part of the reason for that it kind of was all, like, I got started in 1991. I inherited my first Novell NetWare network, right? Yep. At the time, everyone was configured as a supervisor, which was the admin account. They just took the supervisor. I think if you hit the insert key, it created a copy of whatever account, and then they gave it a new name, and there you go, you had your new account. And everybody was effectively an administrator. And that didn't really change for a good long while, right? Like, we should have embedded rigorous security into the very beginnings of what we did. And yet we kind of looked at it as, meh, there's nothing here to steal. Meh, it's a waste. It's a lot to manage, right? And as the world started to shift and turn, and this stuff started to become what business is rather than a thing that was a nice to have for business, right? Now business is digital. You can't really be a successful business if you don't have some digital. Like, even a restaurant still has to participate in delivery services. Right. Even a restaurant still has to participate in Yelp and OpenTable to some degree, right? Your payroll is likely digital. Like, I don't know anybody that's keeping paper payroll anymore, right? So today, you really can't operate a business without being a large percentage digital. And yet, cybersecurity still feels like an add-on. Like, we still consider it optional when it's all said and done.
Yeah. But, there's a reason to that. And the reason to that is the fact that the dynamics of IT security are very different than the dynamics of IT sure. or in general. It's much more dynamic. There's a reason why you see these exhibitions halls. And the reason is that in general IT, you've got the vendor and you've got the customer. And there's a pace of innovation that is driven by that relationship. In IT security, you've got a third actor, which is the bad actor.
Yeah, the opposition.
That
right?
Innovates as well. And there's a red queen race of innovation that makes the IT security stack or IT security solution much more dynamic than the IT system that it protects. So for a long time, there has been attempts to embed IT security in whatever, network security embed in the network, or Microsoft for a long time in the Gates and Ballmer era have looked at security as part of their products, and that failed. And that failed because of the difference in dynamics and the need for stability in the product on the one hand, and the need for dynamics in IT security on the other hand. And how do you get both to work at the same time? Which is, by the way, a very important part of the solution that we'll talk about later.
Sure. I mean, the reality is security is, I like to say security is the one place your business participates in other than the currency market, where you have no control and you play whether you field a team or not.
Exactly.
Right. It's the only place where we're paying to fight against an opponent that doesn't have any rules. And we are always, always, always behind.
Exactly. And that's in times of peace. Let's talk a little bit, let's expand the conversation a little bit to what can go even worse. Imagine times that are less peaceful, and times where there are bad actors that are nation state and are using new technologies such as AI or even old technologies to attack organizations and individuals. And what's interesting here is that I'm left to protect myself. The government, I'm a citizen of a country, and the government doesn't seem to think that it needs to step in and protect me. I need to protect myself. And that's, by the way, in times of peace, I need to protect my IP against some foreign actors stealing it.
Sure. But in this case, we're specifically talking about nation state actors, right? Those that are state sponsored, that are attacking public and private institutions is, I think, a little bit different than private organizations attacking private organizations.
Right. So a country usually have an army to protect against other nations, and has a police to protect against a criminal organization. Not that I'm saying that there isn't these institutions don't do work, but fundamentally, at the core of things, it seems that I need to be much more involved in protecting myself on the cyber front than in other areas.
Well, if someone threatens your business with a bomb threat, people will show up.
Exactly.
Right? If someone threatens your business with an e-bomb, no one shows up. Not that e-bomb refers to a real thing.
Perhaps if an e-bomb explodes, perhaps somebody shows up. I'm not sure always. I'm not sure even that most of the time.
But let's use ransomware as an example, right? You may be in the U.S. You may be contacted by the FBI, but I don't know of anybody that's actually been helped in a meaningful way by the FBI. And there's kind of this conflict of how much information do I want to give? How much information do I retain? Yes. Right? What's the motivation?
I guess if you're a critical infrastructure, if you're the continental pipeline, then the FBI is going to help you.
I was in a
manufacturing. If you are a hospital in London, I don't know if the government is going to step in and help you.
Well, I was in we had a small manufacturing company get ransomware, and the FBI reached out.
That might be the case. I'm not sure about what are the rules of engagements.
Sure.
But I still feel that there needs to be some more involvement from the government, not necessarily intrusive one, but there are other directions in which the government can help address the cyber threats.
But I would like to see, I don't know, 1/10 of the military budget spend funneled into more cyber, like maybe 20% funneled into cyber, right? Because I do think with more money, we can start shutting down some of these bot networks. We can start, blocking traffic. We can start identifying it. The public feed of this information could be extremely valuable. And the other issue that I kind of have is we treat it like it's alchemy, right? Like cybersecurity is very much alchemy. The only time that it becomes chemistry, right? The difference is alchemy was not shared information. I came up with a thing. I kept the thing quiet to me, and only my apprentices would learn only when I trusted them enough that they would inherit, versus chemistry is an open science, right? And that's kind of how tech works and technology works, and it's how you build intellectual property, and it's how you build, a lot of the business stuff at the same time. We're in this phase where it's us versus a well-armed, well-funded, no holds barred, no rules attacker, right? That has the ability for infinite global reach on a scale we cannot compete with. And I think the other advantage to governments getting involved is making the information more public, right? Kind of leveling the playing field a bit, and kind of raising the waterline, right? They wouldn't erase the private knowledge, but they would certainly raise the waterline on what was public and what was publicly available and what we could all kind of work from. And I think the advantage to that would be enormous.
I would say that both are very good. I agree with both directions, and I would add that perhaps it's surprising or a little bit different direction is government, I would say, auditing or government-sponsored auditing of organization on the one hand, and funding of for this process of education and tooling and whatever of meeting that audit on the other hand, based on the level of criticality, right? It's if you're a critical infrastructure, it's one thing. If you are a restaurant, it's a different level. But do it for everyone. Kind of more of that type of process would be also helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting, right? Offer businesses like build, since we have the ability to virtualize networks and thus virtualize pieces of security within that, right? Like SASE is a really good example of that. SD-WAN is a good example of some of the things we can now do. It also seems like it would be reasonable for the governments to set up different virtual networks. So if you're a mid-sized organization that really doesn't understand the nuances, doesn't invest in the nuances of cybersecurity, maybe you subscribe to a free service by the federal government that's a different layer of internet, right?
Perhaps.
Sure,
I'm not a big proponent of direct government intervention, so I'm looking for ways in which the government can cultivate indirectly the security of organization versus forces them to use stuff which
I don't want to force them.
I'm sure technology that comes from the private sector will be better.
I don't want to force anyone. I want to give them the option to say, look, either make the investment and secure your organization or use the welfare version. Right? Because too many organizations, when given the option, will just simply not spend the money. Right, we see it.
But if they will be forced to be audited by the government, so they have to meet some audit and by a certified auditor like PCI compliance or whatnot, like credit card, but for everybody. On the one hand, and on the other hand, the government helps them. Perhaps that's my idea, the best idea that I came with. I think that your idea of the government putting resources in preventative methods and providing, both, prevention on a global scale or on a nation scale, as well as threat feeds on a nation scale and that sort of stuff. That's also sounds like a direction that, in any case, invest as much as you invest in offensive cyber on the attack. Invest in protecting
Yeah,
your citizens.
I think the issue is I can field a cyber army for far less money, for far less logistics, with far less casualty rate as a nation than I can a traditional army. The traditional armies are really, really, really expensive. They're dangerous. They have a natural threat level to them that's public, and the whole world can see when an army moves. Like that's the whole point of military intelligence, right? Is to watch for movements of other militaries. I can't see that in the digital space to nearly the ease. So that means I need to upgrade my digital defense in the same way that I upgraded my physical defense. Like our digital defense needs to be as effective, not as invested, but as effective as our physical defense. And it's embarrassing at this point that it's not.
I agree, and I will take it further and say that there's also aspects to cyber attacks that are very different than kinetic attacks. So most of the cyber attacks nobody takes responsibility for. So there's and also there's no how should I say it, a treaty of what is legitimate warfare.
Sure.
In the
There's
cyber
no rules of engagement.
So
right.
If I attack my opponent and poison the water of that, is that legitimate? No, I don't think so. But there's no Geneva Convention that says, that's not, that's, as far as I know, I'm not an expert. Again, as I said in the beginning, I'm an amateur. But there needs to be some expansion of the rules of engagement, so rules of war to the cyber space.
Well, and I think like that's where you start to get terrorist organization definitions, right? These are organizations that are not state sponsored, that violate the rules of war, the treaties that exist over and over and over again for the purposes of creating and generating terror. Right? We need similar things for the digital space. Right? We effectively need, here's the rules of operation within the digital space, to use the analogy, right? The Geneva Convention of the internet. And those that routinely violate that are labeled as criminal organization or terrorist organizations, and action needs to be taken. Right? It is still too much the wild, wild west, and it's 2024. Like this is how the world operates, and the fragility of our global economy is so tied in with the operation of the internet and the confidence we have in the ability to do business over it, that I think we're beyond the point where this is a necessity.
But can I venture into an area that I understand even less in?
Sure.
And which is information warfare, and the fact that, so obviously AI is going to make everything that we talked about until now worse, because if I've got a cyber soldier, and now I can replicate that with an AI machine and can get sophisticated attacks at the industrial level, that makes the situation much more complicated. But I'm even more concerned about the kind of what's true and what's fake, known problem, and how much worse will it become when AI gets into the picture, and what it creates for society. Because for my thinking about it is that if I am in a continuous situation in which I don't know if it's true or false, I don't know if what I'm seeing is true or false, what I'm reading is true or false, I think that human nature is going to gravitate towards not caring what's true or false, because what you psychologically need is consistency more than truth is just a form of consistency, and I'm going to basically go after some consistent line. I'm going to follow some cluster in Twitter. I'm going to watch some a channel on YouTube. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to consume information in a consistent way. And now, if you've got a perfectly functioning society, you can turn it and fracture it by creating fractions that are gravitating towards different consistent messages, and that's really scary. And that won't, it's almost like people will not care what's true or false anymore. And the last thing that I have to say about it is that it's ironic, because it's almost like, if you take 500 or 1,000 years ago, people gravitated towards what they believed in. They believed in they had a set of beliefs. There wasn't a science of true or false. There was a set of beliefs. And then science came, and the notion of true or false emerged. And now the science got to a point through technology where true or false is not relevant anymore, but your set of beliefs and kind of the reassurance that you get from other people that have this set of beliefs is again what matters. So we are coming full circle and going backwards. So with that, I'll finish that concern.
No, I mean the reality, like, this is a very valid concern, right? The reality is human beings aren't built to take in the amount of information that we get exposed to every day.
Right.
Like, so we get overwhelmed and overloaded really easily, right? The human mind is not an infinite playground. We've got hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that created neural pathways, that created the ways that we think, and it's only the last, to your point, 500 that we've had anything close to science, that we've had anything close to reading.
Well, that's not completely. There was the ancient Greece where,
sure,
but
it was not commonplace.
Yeah, it was a blip.
Well, and it was a very, very small percentage of people that were exposed to science and reason and thought, right? The Plato and Socrates. It's only recently in human history that we've had books. The printing press has been invented, and the common man had the reasonable potential of having a book.
Right.
Like that's all new, and now you have the internet, which is effectively all of human learning, but also all of human conversation, and yet we kind of think of them as the same thing, and they're clearly not the same thing. Yeah. Right.
And now we are seeing that being destroyed by the evolution of the same process that created it.
Well, but I think we're seeing it destroyed because we don't teach logical thought, we don't teach reasoning, we don't teach critical application of thinking, we don't teach people how to learn, and we don't teach people.
No, we teach these people. These are the children that go to school and being taught, and afterwards watch TikTok, and develop a set of beliefs based on the content that they are getting exposed to.
Sure, but they're not taught to challenge thought. Right. Even like if you look at the school system, even the school system is your teacher is the authority, listen to your teacher. The book is the authority, listen to the book. And yet, if you look at the things that we have learned were wrong that we were taught when we were children from those same places of authority, right? There is no opportunity for questioning. There is no opportunity for doubt. There is no opportunity for critical thought. And critical thought should be the biggest piece of the process. Even if the teacher is correct, if you're not taught to question the teacher and you're not taught to question the material that you're given, why would you then question the material that you're given later in life? It all becomes the same kind of thing, right? We're not teaching people,
right.
We're not educating people to teach themselves. We're teaching people to develop a series of beliefs based on information that they're given, not understanding and learning. And so all of it starts to appear like it sounds the same. It sounds just as reasonable. They speak with the same level of force. They speak with the same confidence. They speak with the same authority. And those are all I'm taught to respond to. I'm not taught to respond to, should I question this? Should I be realistic about it? Should I be pragmatic? Should I be, doubting Thomas, as it were? And we're not taught those things. And AI makes that so much worse.
I'm just saying that this is human nature, and the human nature is that when there's no clear understanding of who's the right authority and who's the wrong authority, people are looking for consistency more than truth, to a set of beliefs that they can live continuously and without too many gyrations, and that's what's going to happen.
I mean,
people are going to
the BBC did a really interesting experiment. They had a scientist on and a politician on to argue opposite sides of a debate. The debate might have been something like climate change, but it doesn't actually matter what it is. The scientist had a PhD in the field and was a well-renowned expert, and the politician was none of those things. Politician had no specific knowledge. They had no specific understanding. They were just a politician giving talking points. And they surveyed the audience afterwards and said, who won the debate? Overwhelmingly, the politician. Right? Overwhelmingly. Like it was like 87 to 13% or something, right? It was not even in the reasonable realm of, well, that was close. And that happens consistently. The other thing, there's another piece of research that I've been reading, because I've been trying to figure out, is there a way to kind of overcome this? And what's interesting is when people are entrenched in a belief and they are shown clear evidence why they are wrong, they don't shift their belief. They dig in deeper. It's really, really, really interesting. Like, we wonder, why do people continue to exhibit behavior that is self-harming in many ways, even when they're shown evidence that it is self-harming and factually incorrect, and they double down and dig in. And if you combine that with the misinformation, with the ability to skew, with the financial motivation to create a narrative, and the ability to do all of that through bot networks, so it doesn't even involve humans, right? So you can scale it. The only limit to the ability to scale that sort of activity is budget. It creates a really kind of scary future when you think about it.
And to that, I don't have a good versus the other side. Let's call it fraud, or I don't know how we call it, deep fake, or
well, I think that's
I don't know what's even the name of this decay into subjective beliefs era is. To that really is something that I'm not sure what can be done about it. So that's that on the
on the security side.
Based on the security side, on the cyber side, yeah, I do have. I don't know if it's going to help, but I do have some ideas of how to address. And that's what I've been doing in the last decade, actually, 9 years with Cato.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So how do we solve some of this cybersecurity? Honestly, I think the solution tends to be similar, right? So let's
it's always it's the same solution that the appliance kind of generational transition from software to appliance. It's a generational transition to a new form factor that delivers security in a much more fluid way to wherever it's needed, and that's a cloud network. Essentially, it's how should I say it? Like AWSing IT security. If you want security to work in the digital age, you need to digitally transform IT security. So all you need to do is go back to the original presentation of Jeff Bezos on of AWS and see what he says. You've got an idea, you've got a business outcome or an application or whatever, and in the middle you've got undifferentiated grunt work. And the idea is to take that undifferentiated grunt work, deliver it as a take it on, deliver it as a cloud service, and save all of that from the all of these organizations that can't afford it. And it not only simplifies the move from the original idea to the business outcome, but also when you close the feedback loop, saves this work continuously as you evolve that business outcome over time. So essentially, AWS in IT security, and that's what we have been doing for the last 9 years at Cato.
Right. So the issue ultimately is security has become more complex because the attackers have no rules and are getting better and better and better, finding better and better ways to evade the systems we put in place to check for trust. And we've been financially motivated to maybe not invest so well. And that's led us to this culmination of the environment that we're in now. And what Cato's doing is saying, hey, as this becomes more complex, we want to give you a simple way to trust again. Right?
Exactly. And we want to take on, so there's a new threat, Log4j. We want to take on the discovery of that or learn about that, come up with a solution, test it on the big cloud service that we have silently, and then implement it for all of our customers, which means that you don't need now to go to your 2,000 appliances and patch each one of them, which you don't have the time, and you are vulnerable while you're not doing that.
Well, and
so that's kind of the idea. As a simple example to the more abstract way of you describing.
Sure, but even more, like, let's take that example of Log4j, right? And let's say you have 2,000 instances of Log4j in your environment, and let's say you can patch 2,000 instances and you could do it instantly. You know what you don't have the ability to do is guarantee that there's only 2,000 instances, right? Like, the level of perfection required to do it the old way is too high, right? If I find 2,000, I patch 2,000, I patch 2,000 instantly, great. But if I have 2,258, I still have 258 that are unpatched, and that's I think where part of the big problem happens is the level of precision is too high to just rely on something like patching to solve the problem.
Yeah. So now I need to get a little technical and say that in the old world, in the old cyber world, there used to be a simple solution to that. You create a perimeter around your soft interior, a hard perimeter, and you make sure that perimeter protects against, and you update that perimeter, and that way you're sure that everything inside is protected, and there's a clear inside and outside. And obviously with digital transformation, that perimeter is gone, and there's no inside or outside anymore, etc. And what Gartner calls SASE, and what is the convergence of network security into the cloud network, recreates that perimeter in the cloud. So basically, you take all the elements of the organization, whether it's a home user, whether it's a cloud data center, a SaaS application, and an office, you connect it to the cloud network, and that core becomes the new perimeter of the organization. And now you are again in a situation where you have a control point where if you provide security there, everything that is connected to it is secure, and you eliminate that uncertainty that you highlighted.
For sure. It's interesting. There's a parallel to what we talked about before, right? When we go back to kind of feudal times, you secured your home base with walls and a moat and a drawbridge and all those kind of things that we see in fantastical movies and television. And if there was an attack on your city, on your keep, you pulled everyone from outside because you can't farm inside.
Right.
You pulled them inside. You brought up the drawbridge, and you had this wonderful perimeter that guarded against the technology of the time, right? And one of the things I loved about Jerusalem was standing outside the wall. It's a walled city, right? For those who don't know, I haven't been there.
Yeah.
And seeing the different construction methodologies as the wall got taller over time, and the wall got taller over time because, well, initially you're having to protect against something that can only get this high, and then you've got horses that jump over it, and then you've got bows and arrows and spears, and technology improves, and the wall has to get higher and higher and higher to protect the inhabitants until eventually you can't build a wall that's high enough to protect the inhabitants, and you stop building the wall. But that's kind of what happened, and what happens when you can when like the city becomes so large you can no longer wall it is you have things like treaties that say, hey, you can't attack civilians. These are civilian targets or no-goes because we can't protect them anymore, right? So you can only attack those people in uniform because that's considered fair game. And we're now in that position in cybersecurity, right? Where initially we built these perimeters because they were easy to control over and over and over again. And now what's happened is between digital transformation, the kind of growth of remote work, and then the bomb that was COVID that sent everybody home, what were perimeters that we controlled are gone. They're just simply gone.
Right.
And now what we're saying again is with technology like SASE, we can recreate a perimeter. We can recreate a walled garden, but you must participate in the technology. You must participate in order to recreate this perimeter. And you have to think about it a very different way.
Correct. You have to use SASE, but SASE is not the way I suggest you would think of SASE is the third incarnation of the firewall. So the firewall was a floppy disk in software, it was an appliance, and now it's a cloud network. And you had to participate in this technology also in the second generation. You had to put an appliance in the entrance to every exit point that you had to the internet. So it's just a different form of participation, but it's the same thing.
It's similar, right? Because ultimately, I didn't have it, like I couldn't avoid the perimeter previously, right? There was no getting around my firewall. If I'm inside the firewall, I still have to pass through the firewall, and therefore, you know what I mean? Therefore, I participate. With SASE, though, it's not quite the same, right?
It's actually pretty much the same, because also when you had a firewall, think about it. You had a laptop, you went home, and perhaps I went home and worked on my home network, and perhaps there was some malware that my kid downloaded and infected that network, and then I came back into the office and infected the office. So nothing is so it's not really different. It's the same. So if I'm connected to the cloud network, if I'm on the corporate network, I'm protected. If I'm outside, then I'm not protected, and the moves from inside to outside need to be addressed in similar ways.
Sure. The advantage to SASE, again, just to stay technical for a moment, is running firewalls. We're running at layers 2, 3, and 4. Like our traditional perimeter protection is 2, 3, and 4. SASE is 7. Right? We're not protecting.
No, next generation firewalls are layer Palo Alto. Even Checkpoint was layer 7 to some extent, and definitely next generation firewall
but they're doing nothing to protect.
Transparent proxies were the layer 7, so it's all the same. The same. At the micro, it's the same technology. It's just the packaging that is very.
I mean, we could definitely debate that, because you have an inside and an outside. If I'm in, like, if I'm in my office network, to use your malware description, the firewall's not, by default, the firewall's not helping me. It helps me, it inspects the traffic that passes through it. But if I go from my cubicle to the cubicle next to me, it's by default, it's not doing anything. Right. So versus SASE inspects all of it. Right. That's
true to some extent. So basically, within the site or within the cloud data center, traffic that moved between workstations or computers or IoTs or whatever can or cannot be inspected. That really is a choice
but also
of the customer.
Like if I look at how traditional networks were built, right? I routed from site to site. I didn't necessarily firewall from site to site. Like in my perimeter was huge. SASE is not designed with the same like perimeter definition in mind, and so
it's better. So it's fine.
It's very much better. So it's very much better.
It's better,
and that's what I want to make clear is while sure one computer can affect the other computer, the likelihood of either of those computers infecting the application and bringing down the business is much reduced, right? And that's the biggest advantage to SASE. We put everything through it, and we're protecting the crown jewels instead of trying to protect the entire organization in the same way that we did before, which was ineffective. And that goes back to the very first thing about the complexity versus simplicity. It's become more complex, so let's not protect everything to the same level. Let's trust nothing and protect the crown jewels.
Exactly.
Well, this has been awesome. I wish we had answers for all the big problems, but as we're rolling up on 45 minutes of dynamic discussion here, I think it's time to end. Shlomo, I think you and I could talk for weeks on end about an unending number of topics and have a whole lot of fun.
And we didn't talk about our dogs yet. That's
that's true. Well, see, that
how can we end this without talking about our dogs?
I know. Well, mine's right there sleeping behind me. One of them, the other one's at my feet, and the other one doesn't like to come into my office. But I think that means I've got to have you on another episode. So
I'll be more than glad to come.
Fantastic. Well, I had a great time. I hope you had a good time. This has been another episode of Discovering Disruptions in Tech. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. If you'd like to be on, reach out. And look forward to the next episode with Shlomo. Not the next following, but the next time we have Shlomo on. Thanks again for joining me. And
thank you.
Thanks.